Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel. My name is Rachel Svetnoff, and as for the EcoSoc Youth Forum side panel, I am very glad to introduce our panelists as part of the United Nations Association of the USA Global Goals Ambassador. I'm going to do a quick share screen so that way I can introduce everybody, and then I will go into the moderated Q&A. We will leave additional questions for our audience members at the end of the session. So I'm going to do my quick share screen here, and apologies for the formatting. It's not quite perfect on Canva, but it's my preferred method because I just find it to be the most creative. So hello, my name is Rachel, and I am a youth activist and social entrepreneur for UNA USA as Global Goal Ambassador for SDG 17. I will be your moderator for the session. Next, we have Jackie Schiffer, who is the Global Goals Ambassador for SDG 2, who is a second-year master's candidate in Diplomacy and Development Studies at the University for Peace/United Nations Institute of Training and Research. For another SDG 2 is Latrice Mondin, who has over 15 years of direct experience in academia and the nonprofit sector. Next, we have Sophia Long, who is the Global Goals Ambassador for SDG 3, a high school student in New York, an aspiring scientist, and an activist for STEM. Next, we have Virgil Parker, who is the Global Goal Ambassador for SDG 4, U.S. Fulbright alum, community service advocate, and Howard University graduate with a degree in journalism and minor in Afro-American studies. Next, we have Alana Drake, who is the Global Goal Ambassador for SDG 10. She is a junior at Vanderbilt University, majoring in public policy studies and English. For SDG 16, our Global Goal Ambassador is Eileen Dong, who is a trailblazer combating gender-based violence and human trafficking, is the founder and executive director of Hope Pikes Global. And last, but certainly not least, my colleague, Chandra Pauline Daniel, who is the other Global Goals Ambassador for SDG 17, who is a public health professional, a research scientist with a cutting-edge international experience in the field of public health stemming from India, Africa, Switzerland, and the United States. So with that, I'm going to start on the panel and thank you all to allow you the opportunity to introduce yourselves as we start getting into the questions. So question one, what are the challenges youth face in meeting inclusive leadership today? And what challenges can we anticipate the Pact of the Future and Declaration on Future Generations will have? Alana, I'd like to start with you.
Okay, so hi, I'm Ilana, and I wanted to share that with inclusive leadership, I think that a lot of youth may not be willing to share their voice. So I think oftentimes there's only one person or a few people who are featured. So getting people involved is really important, especially with communities such as the disability community, thinking about people with very different experiences who might not be able to get involved. Also, even internet access. So we're on a Zoom call right now. Not everyone actually has the ability to be on Wi-Fi and to get internet access. So we have to make sure that this is an equitable process and that we are able to put everyone in the spotlight.
Exactly. No, I agree. I think that, this, as far as it goes with the Declaration of Future Generations, that a lot of youth feel like they're the stewards of the future generations that are upcoming, and that piece of equitability is inherent to understanding what it's like. Latrice, would you like to make any comments on this?
Yes, I wanted to say thank you. And I love being in the company of my fellow Global Goals ambassadors. And I just wanted to add, I guess it's a little piggyback on what we just spoke about, is that in a human form, all of us want to be seen, heard, and respected. And, youth problems and youth issues aren't just adult issues withered down to like a younger age. There's a different type of forward thinking. There's a different type of inclusivity when it comes to understanding different groups and populations of youth. You have younger youth, you have youth that are in their 20s. So it's a range, and we need to learn how to respect that and also give empathy to that as well. It's not all an all inclusive thing. And then lastly, I believe what we can really do, a takeaway now, is that just highlight the gifts of our youth and just really respect them to be able to stand up and do those things. We have some powerful youth that I work with here every day with you guys, and then also here in Chicago that I work with, and they are willing and capable and they can get the job done. And so just to believe in that could be also one way we can make sure leadership roles for youth can be inclusive.
I think that's brilliant. I think that, you touched on a really key point, which is that youth is a range. And it's while the definition by the United Nations is between the ages of 15 to 24, the Convention of the Rights of the Child from UNICEF indicates that a child, which is different from a young person, is anybody below the age of 18. And I think that cross-generation activity has been instrumental in generating this momentum behind the movement of what it means to be a young person, and I think that is, really crucial to understanding like how this movement can continue to grow. I think all of us at UNA USA, the GGAs, like have this interconnection to young people. Does anybody else would like to make like a few comments about, how this resonates with them either personally or, in their work? If not, I'm happy to go to the next question. Oh, Jackie, I think I just saw you unmute yourself. Feel free to. Yes.
Sure. So I would just add that I think that with youth, it's really important for the youth to be centered as leaders and change makers now. Youth are at the heart of the global goals agenda. And I think that it's very easy for organizations and for leaders to have youth engagement or youth fora just be an add-on. But really, it's been very inspiring to see approaches where youth are really centered as change makers.
Certainly. No, I can definitely agree with that. And, it's something that we see, too often that's overlooked and not enough, like, dive deep into. So, with that type of deep dive, I wanted to capture, especially for in this EcoSoc Youth Forum, they each forum, capitalizes on different SDGs. This year, it's on SDGs 1, 2, 16, and 17. So in that context, I wanted to ask what is being done regarding advancing these particular SDGs, among others, through youth inclusive leadership efforts. Jackie, since we had you just speak now, for SDG 2, what would you say would be like something that you've been working on?
Yeah, so absolutely. I would say that you've seen through UNA USA and through a lot of different UN bodies, there are opportunities through Major Group for Youth and other organizations to apply to be an official delegate. And for me personally, that's been a very meaningful experience. But specifically for SDG 2, the World Food Forum in Rome is hosting a virtual and in-person program this year. And so yesterday I just received news that I'll be an official youth representative. And it's just very interesting to look at this group of people because there are over 293 representatives from countries all over the world. And so we'll be engaging virtually. And again, it goes back to what I was saying before, where, gone are the days where there's this performative involvement of youth, but really seeing your youth involvement. Another program that I just always try to shout out whenever I can is the 10 Billion Strong US Africa Green Leaders Academy. It's a program that focuses on sustainability, but a whole range of other issues. So to me, even though their SDG is probably 13, it really, I think, does an excellent job of SDG 17. And the idea is for youth to have training, but then to really take that training and to do something with it.
That's brilliant. I think that what you spoke about with the World Food Forum, that's amazing. Also congratulations. And I think that there's this movement of not just being seen but being heard, and that's part of the United Nations Youth Campaign, Be Seen, Be Heard. To the context of being able to create those cross-sector relationships and those partnerships you also mentioned with SDG 17. And I'd like to turn to Chandra about her comments on this, just because being able to see this like in your work, what have you seen being done regarding the advancement for SDG 17?
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. Definitely would love to talk about my experience where I started off as a young scientist at the World Health Organization. For me, that was a game changer. So, having participated in several research initiatives, what the World Health Organization did was they called out for junior research scientists to come on board and talk about the impact that you have created through your unique research at the World Health Organization, and not just to stop there, but again, to be part of that entire team in building those guidelines on safe injection practices. That's where I started. So I definitely want to highlight that that's happening now in several UN bodies at the United Nations Population Fund. Several innovative projects are being called for, and the ideas definitely come from the youth, for the youth. So as part of my programs with several universities, with New York Medical College, met with UPenn, uh, again with Johns Hopkins. The idea is to mentor students and to get them where I was at one point of time, presenting and developing those cross-sectoral relationships at the UN. And from there on, I've learned not just a local perspective of addressing community concerns, but also building those key critical partnerships at a global level and having that power to have your voice heard, having contributed to the global agenda, has been a game changer. And I am an advocate for bringing youth in, and happy to work alongside my fellow ambassador Rachel on SDG 17. Over to you.
Many thanks, Chandra. And I think that, that really like captures like how you've been able to integrate not only through, like SDG 17, but many of the others as well. You talk about your work with the World Health Organizations, Johns Hopkins and others, this cross-sector relationship between multilateral agencies and nonprofits, including academia, has been central to like really pushing the needle forward. And to that end, I'd be happy to open this to Latrice or Eileen in case that you guys would like to make any comments on this, particularly given the emphasis on SDG 2 and 16 amongst, some of the others, and wanted to see like if you guys also would like to share your thoughts on this question.
I didn't know who was going to jump in first, so I'll just take a leap of faith here. Sorry to any of my other colleagues who wanted to jump in, but I just had just a tidbit to add to that. Dr. Sandra did an excellent job at letting us know about different resources and different things you can do to get the youth involved. And I think that's like one of the main things to do. I always try to do things that are like takeaways when I work with my college students. So we can create, college campus food bank, which is really needed right now because college students are struggling and they're not able to, it's like books or food, and that's just something that we can't have. It's just unnecessary when we have the resources here, especially in the US, to be able to feed, our young people who need this knowledge so they can be able to be the young professionals that we need. And so that goes into the leaving no one behind and making sure everyone is working collaboratively to make sure that we all have the resources that are needed, but especially at that age where you're in development and you're in your starts of your career. So.
Exactly. No, I think you captured that perfectly. Eileen.
Yeah, so thank you for this opportunity, Rachel, and my dear colleagues. I think I would like to add a little bit of from the perspective of my work in the anti-trafficking realm. I think particularly, as you know, that youth and you have identified children in the United States. Children are defined as anyone age 16 and under, a little bit different, but regardless, children, youth, and young people are specifically targeted and being vulnerable from human trafficking because of the online technology and exploitation. And I think putting youth in the forefront on this leadership decision-making process will really be essential for what we are trying to do with achieving the 2030 goal. And I will go into details in the next subject.
Yes, no, I think that's perfect. And I think I was, just bridging into that, what have you seen, Eileen, are some of the best practices for encouraging youth leadership for meeting, in your case, SDG 16?
Absolutely. I I have a long, a long speech regarding this, but really briefly, I think SDG 16 to educate all of our youth leaders that and attending this forum emphasizes the promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies, access to justice for all, and the establishment of effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Target 16.2 specifically talks about ending trafficking in all its forms. So, first and foremost, I would like to say empowering youth to lead is not merely as an option, but really imperative for the realization of the SDG 16 and the broader sustainable development goals agenda. And the best practices for this, including fostering youth leadership, which I mentioned earlier, but also fostering an environment that champions inclusivity, participation, and empowerment. Further, I think that education emerges as an cornerstone in nurturing informed and engaged youth leaders, and by integrating comprehensive education on peace building, conflict resolution, in my case, human rights, human trafficking prevention, and civic engagement into curricula and extracurricular activities, we will equip young people with the knowledge and the skills necessary to contribute meaningfully to societal transformation. And furthermore, platforms for youth participation must be expanded and diversified to ensure that young voices are not only being heard, but also actively involved in what I mentioned, the leadership roles and decision-making process at local, national, and global levels. And by establishing youth councils, advisory bodies, governments, and organizations can tap into the innovative ideas, perspectives, and energy of young leaders. And in conclusion, I think that fostering youth leadership for SDG 16 amongst other crucial goals are necessary for a holistic approach that will prioritize education, participation, mentorship, and capacity building. By investing in the potential of our youth and young people as agencies of change, we can truly collectively pave the way towards the peaceful, just, and inclusive society for our goal in 2030. Thank you.
That was amazing. Like, if I actually, what I'm going to do right now is give you an applause if I can react. I think that answer, really captures, a number of different angles, particularly in the context of, as you mentioned, like some of the best practices is like really integrate young people's participation in governance and at local, national, or international levels. That is something that, resonates with me in the work that I do personally, but as well as with all of us, because we're all frustrated and tired of, the tokenization of young people. And this is a solution that is actually being put forward. And to that end, a lot of these, issues with solution making, just need to get the advocacy out there. And with advocacy, there's, more for encouraging youth leadership. And I would like to ask Sophia, welcome, and wanted to ask you, in for SDG 3, what have you seen be some of the best practices for youth leadership? And my background is actually in global health, so I see global health and advocacy practically as one and the same. So I welcome your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So I completely agree with what Aline said, especially from an education standpoint. And I think speaking in general, from an education standpoint, we can integrate the sustainable development goals into like a course curriculum to host at like a club or a community activity that can just raise more awareness about these goals and also foster interest. But if I was to talk about what I've done in my own SDG with promoting education. A lot of what I've done is just kind of working with orphanages and kind of promoting education about prevalent health diseases, different ways they can different ways they can go for to prevent being infected. And, I think what we're doing right now with these workshops and conferences, they can also play such a huge role in encouraging the youth to get involved. And from this, a lot of you guys are also hearing our different stories of how we're getting involved. And hopefully that can also encourage you to brainstorm your own ways how you would want to get involved. And like what Lean said, some basic things such as advocacy and also volunteering at nonprofits or different organizations that are aimed to progress and achieve these sustainable development goals. And all of these opportunities will not only mobilize the youth support, but also leverage their influential power to prioritize the SDGs among other audiences.
No, I think that is, that captures it perfectly. And I would be remiss if I did not call on Virgil to also answer this question because of the context of including education, not once, not twice, but at least 3 times. Virgil, would you like to make some comments, particularly in the context of SDG 4?
Yes. So, well, first of all, thank you again for organizing this conversation, and I'm really happy to hear all the inputs of my fellow SDGs, our Global Goals ambassadors. It's really important to recognize how education plays a role in just shaping how we respond to various challenges, right? We have to get our people informed about the dilemmas that are happening, across the spectrum, and get youth rallied behind it. You all have spoken about it, very informatively. I would also add to that with investing in the infrastructures or in the different pockets of different governments around, for example, education, alleviating poverty, addressing gender equality. That will help galvanize youth across generations to be invested in the dilemmas that are impacting their respective communities. And what I want to emphasize when talking about best practices is talking to the idea of cross-sector collaboration, right? You can generate a plethora of resources from the private sector, from the public sector, from the nonprofit community, and to cross-pollinate different tools, ideas, and strategies, and just different methodologies on addressing some of the problems that exist in front of us. And I know we can take time to talk more substantively about that, but even when developing solutions at a very high level or granular level, you have to have councils and committees from people in the community that reflect the community, both from identity perspective and also from an age perspective, so that solutions can be sustainable and be maintained, again, across time. That's how you get youth involved, for starting at the age of 15 or younger, as you've identified, through the 20s, 30s, and so on and so forth, to make sure that the solutions that they see are prescriptive, are effective, and can be prolonged. But education, getting people access to that quality education so they can be able to analyze and to interpret and to break down the different issues, is important, and which is why we have to get more balanced in our education systems.
I think that really it captures everything perfectly, and in a way that leads into what the future of global goals is going to look like. So this question's a little bit off script before we get into, one of the formal ones. And I'm opening this up to everybody here to ask, what do you foresee a post 2030 goal might look like? I'll start on my end. What I see that, as an upcoming, emerging topic is future generation issues in of itself. And some of the research that I've done in the past, I have found that over 16, I think it's 16, if not more, countries have these new positions called these special envoys or commissioners for future generation issues, that in of itself. And I think that's something that's going to be, a huge matter coming up, for whether that's through the United Nations and or at national levels. But that could be, and this could be even a subsection. It doesn't have to be its whole brand new innovative thing, but that's just something that I've seen in the past. Have any of you in your work, have seen one particular target or indicator really rise above the rest?
Can I add one thing to that really quickly?
Sure.
Rich, I did want to emphasize one thing, and I would love to hear from other global goals ambassadors about this. One thing is, which is a hard conversation, is realizing that we may not achieve the objectives set out in 2015 by 2030. Because of the pandemic, which we to an extent did not measure what the impact of that was going to be across the spectrum. There are 2030 objectives that are going to go past more than likely into years, maybe the next decade. For example, with poverty, right now there are still students who are not going to school or who have been out of school across the world. I believe about 125 million plus boys, and around the same amount for women. But also we unfortunately went backwards on numbers on reducing global poverty to an extent. So we have to realize there's going to be a kind of a level set in a recentering to realize we're going to possibly go past 2030 with some of the objectives we set out with in 2015. Just wanted to emphasize that.
Oh yeah, no, I mean that in of itself, like, how we shape like monitoring and evaluation is its own, topic, as well as, a really key concern for what's going to be shaping like post 2030 as well. Is like, how do we like, really, center this to make it make sense, through that data driven lens. Does anybody else have any comments?
Yes, I would like to add on top of what Virgil just said, and thank you for mentioning about some of our goals, including SDG 16 behind the 2030 deadline, should I say. Unfortunately, in my perspective, we're like constantly, regardless of the COVID or other obstacles, the ongoing development of technology. And again, going back to the youth and going back to the human trafficking lens, I'm here in Vienna attending and speaking at the anti-trafficking conference. What's being brought up constantly is the technology. And as we have this new slogan that combating human trafficking without tackling technology is really not combating human trafficking. And there are so many new forms of trafficking being developed because of technology, so many new types of victims being exploited because of technology and the social media platforms. And how can we involve youth, because youth are being on the forefront of utilizing technology and using the social media? How can we fight against these profit-driven traffickers in terms of using our skills to combat trafficking?
Exactly. Nope. And I think that that is also going to be like one of those, like really major issues coming up as well is trafficking. And, in that context, what the future of all of these issues are going to look like and how we're going to apply that, through these different lens. And, to that end, getting onto, like what we see as, upcoming, what we see as in terms of projections, how would you define to be strategic foresight, and how would somebody like myself, if I wanted to be like an activist in the SDG space, how would I be able to apply it to the sustainable development goals? Virgil, since you talked about this like through that monitoring evaluation lens, I'd like to start with you on this question.
Sure. I'll just say quickly, particularly providing a strategy on how to address the issues. It's kind of what our ambassadors and diplomats did back in 2015 when they organized and set out the ideas for the Sustainable Development Goals, is realizing in your community, in your region, in your hometown, in your state, no matter how actively you want to be involved, say, here is this issue that is important to me. It can be education, it can be homelessness, it can be some channels of poverty. What any of the 17 SDGs. Here is this issue that I see. Here's an objective that I want to reach within the next 2 to 3 years. Here are the people who are instrumental in addressing that objective. It can be your local hometown mayor, your town supervisor. It can be the heads of some of your local foundations. It can be nonprofit leaders. I want to engage these persons and ask them what are their plans and what are their tools they're going to use to address said objective. And I'm speaking vaguely intentionally because this is a model that definitely can be replicated. And if you show your interest and your desire to bring about and to work with collaboratively, bring about that effective change, that is how you apply the idea to the SDGs and to addressing issues in your community. Because the ideal is, so I mean, the concept, and I would love for my global goals ambassadors to speak to this, the concept behind the SDGs was to bring about prosperity across the world, but that's a daunting, very, very daunting task. It has to happen from a micro level and to build up, right? To have, it can be top-down solutions or bottom-up solutions. You have to work across the spectrum to ensure that, one, we're not duplicating efforts and that the efforts are seamless. And again, I'm using the word effective. So work with the individuals, more likely than not in your community, no matter where you're from. There are people who have your same shared passion and want to see outcomes similar to what you are intending with the issue that you've identified. Engage those individuals with a simple phone call, a cold call email, or show up at the front door and say, hey, this is an issue that I find as a problem in our community. Here are some solutions that I have researched or looked into through other data pools or through Google or what I've seen done in another region of the world, another community, etc. Can we compose a group to work on this issue, since we have the tutelage to get it accomplished? And that's how you can work to get that done from a strategic, effective, applying it to the SDGs, again, from a bottom-up standpoint.
I love that answer. It's something that I've applied to my own work by, and this is not necessarily like out of context, but just for some background, I am a visiting associate of practice at the University of Notre Dame, where we are researching how we can identify opportunities for municipalities in the United States. So this is at the mayor level, how to engage them with the Sustainable Development Goals, utilizing a dashboard that was created by my faculty collaborator. And to that end, we're seeing this proliferate across other states. Hawaii, for example, released their Aloha Plus Challenge and their own voluntary local review, as well as different cities such as Pittsburgh, Orlando. So we're seeing this proliferate here in the U.S. slowly but surely, as well as through other countries as well. I recently did a study that was more related towards the desalination technologies of providing access to clean water, but it was all part of, in terms of for the region of Kenya, their Kenya Vision 2030, which is based off of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so they have it from, while, a localized standpoint, also at a national level. So being able to see these contexts, really come to life here, make it applicable is something that can be done and has been done. So there's precedence. All there is left is that motivation to take that next step forward. So in that way, I'd like to ask Chandra, what have you seen, or how do you define strategic foresight, and how would you apply it?
Thank you, Rachel. I was waiting to talk about predictive analytics. We're in the age where we have AI and harnessing technology. I applied it in my research, and I got students to apply it alongside me. So I championed students coming alongside myself in my research, and I had this excellent ideas that came from Urbana Champaign, where a TikTok video was created. My research was addressing technology facilitated gender-based violence, which is going to spiral out of control down the line if we do not do something about it. That's SDG 5.2, and using partnerships to address and any kind of digital violence. I had innovative ideas that poured in, and from UNFPA, I had this call and ask for, can you work on predictive analytics? How would SDG 5.2 look in 2030? How does it look in 2050? We have our dashboards, the SDG analytics. So what I did was used simple Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, applied predictive analytics, and looked at the scores for Mexico, for India, for US, and did the comparison. and presented it and got students to do it alongside myself. Applying these predictive analytics is going to strengthen our policies to show us where will we stand in 2030. We want to augment that from the angle of monitoring and having those data points available, playing favorites for SDG 17.18 and 17.19, where we have to make those data sets available. And that comes in handy when you apply predictive analytics. Not everyone can do it, but with a Microsoft Excel, it's pretty easy. The guide is there. You just go ahead, play around with the dashboards. And I really love the idea of taking it as a practicum into universities. I started off presenting ideas to New York University. Now in the process of talking to several students, pretty much the goal is let's join hands and harness technology to address the future. Thank you, Rachel. Over to you.
Sure thing. No, and that's, it's empowering to hear how you uplift students in your work, coupled with, you know, this new, I would say, like, this emerging popular field, in the way that, you know, a lot of these opportunities often, you know, come about, which is it starts with a very, you know, like, small exclusive type of club, and we hear about, you know, like, new things that are arising, and this is opening the doors for young people to engage right away. And I think that is, you know, critical to what it means to decentralize, even in terms of the decolonization, you know, these new fields of understanding, you know, in terms of, you know, like, what the future of these issues are going to look like. Latrice, I'd also like to ask, what are your thoughts on strategic foresight and how you would apply it?
Yes, hard acts to follow with Dr. Sandra and Virgil, but definitely can add a little bit onto it. I am a community engagement and academic for about like 15 years. And what I've seen is that just to do what Virgil was speaking about is to take it to the micro level. We have a lot of movements here involving, you know, violence prevention, because it's heavy in Chicago. But what we learned is it starts block by block, person by person, from that very micro level. So to do something just as small as like getting a church group involved, or a college group involved, or even a neighborhood involved, but also going even smaller, your block club, your citizen group, you know, those different groups as well can be a part of just putting those little seeds in the ground to be able to make it blossom and grow. Another thing I found is that a lot of people don't even know that they can be involved in these things on this level, like United Nations Association. They're not even sure they can be a member. They don't know how things are navigated here with us in this space. And so that's another layer that I have been really pressing and making sure to empower others to know that it's not just in New York. You know, you're all across the United States. You can be able to be involved, and you do have a way to be able to push the needle forward, to be able to impact different things on a small scale, but also on a global level as well. And my last thing is that really taking, again, that micro level, but actually connecting everyone to an issue that happens globally as well, that gets that global health in there, where, you know, zero hunger doesn't just impact a city in, you know, Chicago on the south or west sides or north sides. It does impact Sudan as well on a more heavier level. But we're looking at an issue that we can see that's here, and then how does it develop on a global level as well, which you can be able to see the trajectory of things on how you can be able to get more involved and even just raise awareness in different countries that have been silenced or have been kind of pushed under the rug, where we don't see things that are happening there, where you can be able to bring that to the forefront as well and advocate, at least to have them have a voice. And, you know, at some point, hopefully, maybe start programming where you can bridge those things, resources going, you know, back and forth. So yeah, so that is, you know, some of my gems that I think that I have seen throughout the time that I've been in this role. And, you know, again, just going block by block is something that I am now being able to really implement in my role here in Chicago with the SDG.
No, it's brilliant, and it actually really captures what I recently read from actually former First Lady Michelle Obama, where she says we were planting seeds of change, the fruits of which we might never see. We have to be patient, and I think that alone is not only inspirational but really grounds us into that community-centered movement that sometimes even just the smallest change could have like that large effect, even if we are not the ones to benefit from it. That doesn't mean that it's not worth fighting for. And being able to capture that, I think this is really important when it comes to how we apply what we have done and what we are continuously learning ourselves into making the world, without being too cliche about it, just a little bit brighter, a little bit of a better place. So thank you for sharing, like through that lens. And when we start thinking about, what comes after the 2030 agenda, what would be not only just like a time frame, I mean, everybody has mentioned, in some context, shape, or form that, many people are just like unaware. It's like we don't know what we don't know. In your case, what have you seen would be like a good starting time for what comes after 2030, and how to start, just bringing that voice out, being able to create that sense of upliftment, or elevation, I should say. So I would like to start with Jackie on this one.
Sure. So I think that when we're considering at what point do we pivot to the 2030 agenda and how we're thinking about the future, or I'm sorry, I misspoke. When we start thinking beyond the 2030 agenda, the time is absolutely right now. We touched very briefly on the importance of monitoring and evaluation, but monitoring and evaluation to me is just one very important part of a continuous dialogue between states, between civil society, non-governmental organizations, to really assess what is working, what's not working, to be able to have those conversations honestly and transparently, which I think sometimes is a real struggle for states and for nonprofit organizations. Everyone wants to think that they have found the solution, but being able to come to the table and really assess where those shortfalls are will allow for us to innovate and ultimately to achieve the SDGs and goals that we set forward in the future.
That brings up like it's not a paradox, but it's one of those like sayings where we can work on planning very successfully, but are poor executioners when it comes to actually implementing the plans themselves. It's this like old adage, and I can't quite remember the number, but that's exactly what it reminds me of. It's like, at what point do we start, stop with the plans and actually start the implementation? And I think that in of itself, as you mentioned, is going to be, a key part of, like that switch between, what are we going to do when it comes to that post 2030? When do we start? It has to begin like yesterday. And, being able to have that action driven approach is what's going to be critical to not only the success of 2030 goals, but, what's after. Virgil, I'd like to ask, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you said what you just said a moment ago, is that the conversations are already happening right now. So just to be clear and to put it in everyone's mind, those who are listening now, who will listen to this recording, 2031 is just 7 years away, right? COVID last month was the 4-year anniversary of the start of the pandemic, right? And that it does not feel like it's been, that long. This 7 years will go by in a breeze. It really, really, really absolutely will. So to emphasize, the conversations are being had right now with our diplomats from the different countries in the United Nations, with the experts who sit on these global tables, these policymaking tables, from the World Health Organizations to the myriad of other international organizations that just talk about, okay, what do the infrastructures look like and the capacity look like for different countries, and how do we move the needle forward on addressing challenges? So what I would encourage is similar to what we're doing here in this small space, is realizing that these conversations and these forums are duplicated, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them are public. I think a great start is to do some research of the United Nations or similar organizations to the World Health, similar organizations to the CDC, or there's plenty of organizations out there, and find out what forums are there that you can attend virtually or in person. Eileen just spoke about she's speaking at a trafficking conference, right? That's just one. There are, again, a myriad of opportunities where you can get yourself invested, and to hear from the experts in the space are saying what are current trends, what are current solutions that are working, what is not working, what are fears that are coming up within the next couple of months, not even looking 7 years down the road, what are fears that are present right now, and then go back, and I will emphasize this, to that collaborative table that I hope that is created in your community. If not, I would charge you to create it by approaching the local nonprofit, by reaching out to your local representative, be it your mayor or, again, your town supervisor. I'm going to be redundant, your city council member, and asking, can we create these councils and make sure it is reflective of our community based upon identity and age, and how can we hopefully continue the conversations of what does 2031 and beyond look like. But it starts right now, right? Because we are at a reality where our 2030 agenda may not be achieved by 2030, but in order to maintain a generational effect and have a positive baton to pass on to the future, we've got to develop these systems and these infrastructure with groups presently. So please research some of the forum spaces that are public, both virtually or in person, and how you can get engaged with what experts are talking about right now.
Exactly. No, I don't even have much to add to it, just because of, the amount of implementation focused, work that it takes to be able to, get into this, automatically. And, to that end, this sounds, very broad in terms of, like, everybody that can be involved, but I wanted to focus and really drill down here into what would and what does the future of a young person's role, youth role, in shaping the next global agendas would look like, and how can young people contribute to reach, both the 2030 SDGs and other future goals. And this could be related to, like, the African Union 2063 agenda. It could be our common agenda, Summit of the Future, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So to that end, Alana, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this.
So hi everyone again. I would say start small in terms of projects. So thinking about the impact that you have in your community rather than maybe nationwide. But start with looking into ways that you can serve your community. So volunteering with homeless shelters, thinking about prevalent issues in your community, whether that be food banks, whether that be food insecurity, whatever it is, try to get involved with the local community and their needs. And then I would say also try to connect to other activists who also want to make a difference. So I'm a college student right now, and I found it really helpful to have a community of global goals ambassadors who are really willing to take the next step, and also amplify other people's voices as well. I think that's really important to collaborate with ideas and projects, because that's how we get things done. It takes a community to get things done. It's not just the individual, but I think by every youth coming together, we can really push the goals forward.
Nope, I think that is absolutely correct. And I think that is, certainly, like, one of those mechanisms to which that we see, like, as that driving force. Sophia, I would like to invite you to make your comments.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with Yana, and adding on to that, I personally feel like the youth are much at the front of innovation and creativity, and therefore, if you're getting involved, you're also implementing innovative solutions to help combat a lot of the global problems occurring today. And I think a lot of us have already seen it with a lot of other youth communities where they're already protesting and hosting rallies and advocating across social media to ensure that these problems are being heard, and also mobilizing communities and other audiences to also join our movement. And I think, if you want to get involved with promoting these goals and achieving these goals, I would suggest just putting yourself out there, working with different communities and organizations, just volunteering for a positive change. Because, once again, what Yana said, if we do work together, we will see a positive change happen.
Exactly. Nope. I think that that collaboration, that collaborative piece has been quintessential and really like, brought out even into interconnecting the SDGs themselves. Everything is connected. And Eileen, I welcome your thoughts on this as well. Oh, Eileen, you're muted.
Okay, let's try again. I was just going to talk about technology and I forgot to unmute myself.
No
So
worries.
yes, I started off thinking about, okay, what would I want to talk about regarding this topic? And I thought about technology, which a lot of our colleagues here today has talked about. But I wanted to, dive again into the perspective of gender-based violence and human trafficking. And I think it's really important to really see things from a global lens. I love what Virgil said earlier about, working with intergenerational, multidisciplinary, cross-sector, and really that's a practice that we must incorporate. However, I'm sitting here and talking to people across the table, say, okay, this is what's happening on our neck of the wood, and this is what's happening on the other side of the world. To give you an example so that it looks like closer to what I'm talking about. So forced marriage, for instance, is not something that is in the rule of law in the United States. However, in the UK it is, and it is by the rule of law by the United Nations as well. So how can our young people, I love Dr. Chandra talked about policy making and data-driven policy making, which I'll touch upon later. But, how can our young people, once again, be the leaders in this data-driven policy making? And really do the research and share our best practices, share our case studies, and share our resources with our global partners, and really put the money instead of doing the research what has already been done in other countries, and put it in where it is needed, whether it is to build shelters, whether it is to rescue people on the front line. So that's one of the areas I would like to mention for our youth leaders to be the decision makers, to have a seat on the table for the future policy and program making. Additionally, touching upon the data-driven policy making, I must say that I feel very sad when I was making the addressing this issue at the conference today. And while we in the United States watched the movie Sound of Freedom, and there are similar versions of these movies happening around the world, and we see these movies say, oh, okay, this is something that's happening on the other side of the world, and it has nothing to do with me. And trust me, I have had these kind of conversations with people, and they were like, no, it has nothing to do with me. I'm sorry, I don't feel like helping. And this is a true conversation. But how can we really, show our empathy as youth leaders in this leadership in protecting the human rights, because this is a violation of human rights, and for our youth, not just youth, for girls, for women, for boys and men. And also, the missing part is, I tell people, I'm gonna give you some shocking numbers fresh off the pot, that there has been since 2014, the last 10 years, a 37% increase of the illegal profit from human trafficking, and it has now reached 236 billion US dollar. And to give you an idea, quantify that is some of the at least 30 nations in Europe, their GDP. And obviously these profit-driven traffickers, they are working in these areas. However, when I'm talking about this is not the whole number. And this is where I'm going to talk about the culturally specific approach, the holistic approach. I see Sophia, Dr. Chandra, some of us from probably the Asian ethnicity. And we had celebrated some of the victory about, yes, we now have, at YMCA, one of the agencies we work with, have taught the youth about consent. Unfortunately, I must say that consent, that terminology does not exist. So how can our youth leaders really incorporate some holistic approach? And I say it's not one size fit all. How can we go to we have in the Midwest a large Hmong community. We have in Houston, Texas, a large Vietnamese communities. While there are a lot of similarities, there's also some differences. We must individualize our approach in order to truly have those data shown. And yes, it will be shocking to see an even larger number of victimization, a larger number of the dollar amount. But that only means that the work is being done. And until then, we can really tackle the issue of rescuing the effort. And I must say that this task is in the hands of our youth leaders in the next 2030 agenda.
I think that, this brings up an excellent point, which is that, this is a practical applicability of being able to see, like where we stand with issues regarding human rights, such as trafficking, and how they are going to be projected into the future in terms of how young people are going to rise to the occasion and achieve progress in a way that is measurable, but also in a way that's, truly impactful. And to that end, being able to hear each of you talk about, the issues that you care about, the issues that matter to you, your community, and even nationally, and furthermore, has been able to really capture, this from not just like a passionate standpoint, but a driving force. It is a need, it is an itch, it is much more than just like the passion in of itself. It is at the root of it empathy and showing compassion, regardless of your identity, your circumstances, and being able to uplift the next generation and future generations, to be able to stand tall and to drive that forward into a way that we may not yet even imagine. And so with that, I would like to thank each of our panelists for sharing your lived insights, your roles in this context, and being able to proliferate the knowledge and experience towards the future of the youth role and the SDGs from the perspectives of our United Nations Association of the USA Global Goals Ambassadors. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you, and I would like to open, in case any of our audience members does have a few lingering questions, to be able to open that, if you guys don't mind staying on for 5 minutes, to which afterwards, I'm also going to take a picture real quick, and that would drive the rest of our time together. But I'm going to stop the recording right now, and just wanted to have that opportunity to thank you all.